know how to use it very well. So,
We're waiting for green.
See the keyboard with this button right next to it on the side.
it's the one that says power. All right, so I push this, the green button. See, the thing on the, see, up and down, and see, okay.
Show him after.
All right, that goes there, that goes there. Okay, excellent. Super, thank you. Well, thank you all. Thank you for inviting me. Actually, I think it was, as opposed to inviting me, it was more like Stephen conning me into it. But, Stephen and I and my family go way back. And it's, as he mentioned, it's been a true love of mine since a little kid. And playing around the old shops here in Carson. I lived in Carson until I was about 12 or 15 maybe. And then my folks moved up to Virginia City and had been there ever since. And after I got out of the Army, we went back there. So I was fortunate enough that my parents, Graham Hardy Paula, had a basic good collection of historical photographs, Crockwell's, Watkins, all these other guys that were out there. Was it working okay?
You'll be right on top.
Right on top? Oh, is that better?
Yeah.
Better? Okay. Yeah, I'm not used to using the microphone, so I usually try to talk fairly loud in case people in the back can't hear. But anyway, so I was fortunate enough that they had a good collection of photographs. And I built on it since I was about 10, 12 years old. And as I was talking at the table a little while ago, I've unfortunately, to my wife's consternation, is that I've spent a lot of stupid money on photographs. Yeah, that's a true statement. Yes, I don't claim to be an expert on the stuff in the Comstock. Mark Twain had a famous quote that he made, and people have attributed it to other people's, but I know that it came from some of his early work, and he was real good friends with Rudyard Kipling, and he used to always say that Rudyard Kipling knew everything there was to know, and he knew the rest. And I think of that kind of like in reference to mines and mills with another person in the room here, is that Dan Webster knows all there is to know, and I know the rest. And Dan and I talk shop from time to time on different mines and mills and so forth. So what I would do is I put together, this is actually in reality is a two-part program. So we should be out here by 11. Actually, it technically is. It's written and put together as a two-part. So I put together in the first part some of the more important and mines that you'd see and so forth that would kind of demonstrate what the impact of the mines and some of the mills were on the Comstock. Because it's interesting as you go up there today, as you well know, you go up there today. And you walk around, you drive around, and you don't see any of this. And so I get the question all the time, well, what happened to all the old buildings? And I have actually another presentation that I do from time to time, and that's the title of it, What Happened to All the Old Buildings. And it's a compilation of an old building and what's there now, and an old building and what's there now. And it's a fun presentation because it gives you a relationship to, if you go up to BC, you see a building, you go, oh, I know what was there. I remember seeing a picture of what was there. So as we move forward, I'm moving relatively fast because this stuff needs to, there's a lot of things that I would like for you to see. So this first picture is one that I just recently picked up. It too was a stupid money photograph, and I don't often tell my wife how much I spend on these things. So if any of you know my wife, please don't talk to her. Yeah, maybe that would work. Is it working?
Yeah.
Working okay? All right, cool. This is a really pretty rare photograph. It is pre-fire, so it's pre-1875. And as you look at it, you can see This right here is Taylor Street. So right here, this railing here is the building that the tourism office is located in now. You go back over here and you've got where the current Washoe Club bar is located, and our building was right across the street over here. And this is, I think that this was taken probably from the Armory building or in the area of the Wells Fargo. And I show you this building, this picture, just because I'm tickled with it, the fact that it's a pre-fire. Pre-fire photographs are hard to come by. And so this one, I was managed to pick up two pre-fire photos, actually 3 pre-fire photographs recently. This was another one that I picked up recently that shows the community shortly after the fire, and it's a little bit hard to see with this, but I scanned this thing at 2400, so I can almost look in the windows of some of these buildings. But if you look closely, and I'm not sure if you can see it, but if you move over here to the Catholic Church, which is right here, St. Mary's, I think that's it right there. But when you zoom in on it, there's scaffolding on the back of it where they were repairing it after the fire, the Great Fire. This shows you the scope of what that community consisted of. And actually, if you move down from there, you come down here. This is H Street, and I live down here on I Street, right back over in here. And this was the St. Mary's Catholic orphanage technically for girls, but they had a group of boys in there that the diocese never found out about. And I have another photograph that shows the boys. It's a photograph taken from up in this area, and it shows all the girls lined up over here on the other side of the building, and kind of around the corner over here is a group of boys. So the nuns took care of these orphan boys, but didn't like to. The diocese did not like to. Oh, Brad. I'm way further where I should be. I'm going backwards, I think. Am I going?
No, here, I'll reset it.
Am I going forward or backwards?
Hang on.
There it is. Okay, so yeah, this thing goes fast. So this is just another quick photograph from another view, showing what the community looked like in the 1870s, and you can see here the train house, or where they parked the train at night, and it's right there. And then the railroad came down and around, and I don't think I included this other photograph of the railroad. No, I didn't. I'm sorry. So I moved on to the Utah mine. The Utah mine was located in 7 Mile Canyon. And does everybody know pretty much where 7 Mile Canyon is?
No.
No? Okay. That's too bad. Moving on. Do you know where 6 Mile Canyon is? Let's try that. And 6 Mile Canyon goes from the center of Virginia City down through the canyon, down into the Dayton Valley, and meets up with Dayton, basically, down there. 7 Mile Canyon comes off of 6 Mile Canyon about halfway down and goes north, to the north end of Virginia City, pretty much. And why do you suppose it was called 7 Mile Canyon? Because it's only 1 mile long. So how did it get to be 7 Mile Canyon?
Underground?
Yeah, they added the 6 to the 1 and got 7. That's strictly, actually, the absolute answer to why it's called 7 Mile Canyon, because it's only 1 mile long. So the Utah mine was one that was not really well known. It was not a great producer, but it was over in the canyon, away from Virginia City proper. But it was a good sized operation, and it operated for about 12 years or so. And then later on, it continued on, and they did some reworking and operated it to 1885 and clear into the 90s. So they had assessments and dividends, and all these mines had assessments and dividends. And if you're not sure if you understand what assessments and dividends are, you would buy stock in a mine, and however much you paid for the stock, just like today, you have stock and you like to get dividends from the company you bought stock from, right? Well, in those days, if you paid your assessments that they assessed, because you would buy the stock, but they'd also come back and say, hey, we need another $100 from you this year, because we're from all of our stockholders, because we're trying to make you more money. But it was their way of kind of taxing you, I would guess. But you'd had to pay assessments each year to be able to continue holding your stock. So this is the Utah. It was up in 7 Mile Canyon. And if you would look like, kind of back up in here is where Geiger grade would be, and would be coming along down here, and then it would drop down over into what's called the highlands now. This is going north, and you'd be going into Reno down the Geiger grade. Which a point of trivia is, if you ride a motorcycle, don't drive on Geiger grade, because it has the highest motorcycle fatality rate in the state, and has had for several years. So being with the volunteer fire department for the last 40 years, I have no idea how many people I've picked up off of there, both alive and dead. So it's a dangerous place to ride motorcycles. The Utah is a large operation, and as you go through and we look at some of these pictures, think about the size of these buildings that they were. If you look at, we'll use this one since it's the first one as an example, and if you look at these windows, these essentially are 3050 or 3060 windows, and some of them are 50, which means it's 5 feet across, and these look like they're probably 450. And maybe this one's probably 6 foot high. So there's 5, 10, 15, 20 feet, and there's probably another 3 or 4 feet there, 4 feet there, another 4 feet over there. So those add up. So as you look at some more of these buildings, you'll see long rows of windows, and generally all of those windows are at least 5 feet wide. And you think, wow, these are huge buildings. So as we move forward, then we go to one of the more knowledgeable ones, or people are aware of, and that's the Hale and Norcross and Savage, which we commonly call today the combination. That was a useless operation. It hardly made anything out of there. It was pretty much a wasted effort. But it was a big effort on the part of a group of the mining companies, the Hale and Norcross and the Savage. The Savage operated way into the 1980s, I think. Savage company was still functioning and still had some underground workings. In fact, where my house is built, I bought from the Savage family that owned some of the properties still in Virginia City in the 70s. So the Hale, Norcross, and Savage, which I'll show you a picture after this, 1870s was the deepest shaft in the United States. And the Collar, Potosi, Hale, Norcross, Savage combined efforts with a pretty famous man, Isaac Requa, and it was called the Requa Shaft. This particular one was one of the main operators of that mining company. It was plagued with flooding, like so many other of the mining operations on the Comstock. These pumps, and you start thinking about, and you know, that's the problem when I start going on this. I start trying to explain all of the political activity that occurred around these things, and I get off on rabbit trails. And what makes me think is this: when you look at this thing is 3,250 feet deep, and they're pumping out on a 24-hour basis, or maybe 36 sometimes, 660,000 gallons. That's essentially, 660,000 gallons is an Olympic swimming pool. And they're pumping out on a 24-hour basis of water the equivalent of 9 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So think of the equipment that is required to accomplish that. If you have a well at home, if your home is on a well like Greenhall's house, if you think what kind of gallons per minute that you get from your home's well or cabin's well or whatever the case, and then you think, how do these guys pump out that much water? So you have to remember that you get down and you're going to hit aquifers in there. And in Nevada we have two basic aquifers. One is considered a residential and the other one is considered an industrial. And then there's kind of a third aquifer that is a agricultural aquifer. And all of those would pump water into the mines. And so if the water got up too high, you're not able, or you got high at all, you were not able to dig further down to where the gold is and be able to accomplish your goals with your mining company. That was a major problem for them. So in this case, in 1886, they abandoned or stopped using the area below the 2,400 foot level, and that's 2,400 feet below the surface of Virginia City. 2,400 feet. Now, what is the altitude of Carson City? Okay, 48, depending on where you are, 42 to 4,800. The airport is 4,200. So I think of that. So if our altitude here in Carson City is 4,200 feet above sea level, and you go down, you're halfway to sea level, 2,000 feet below. So what are the ramifications of being 2,000 feet below the surface? How do you get air to the people? If you're down there working in those mines, you're breathing all the air that is contaminated from black powder explosives. You're breathing air of any other fumes that might be down in the area, and it becomes very problematic. And that was part of the whole thing with Adolf Sutro. He decided that he was going to build a Sutro tunnel, and the idea was to take care of the miners, because it was a safety issue to a great degree, and that's what he was building his premise on, that this is a safety issue for the miners. This is the Collar, Norcross, and Savage, and we call it the combination shaft. And it's on, if you're standing in the middle of Virginia City and you're looking off to your right, kind of at 45-degree angle, you'll see the remnants of what was the shaft, or the working, the buildings. So here again, you look at those, how many windows are there, and you can determine how big this structure is, roughly. You know, so you add up, and some of these structures, you'll see one picture a little bit later that is the Gould and Curry mine, or mine and milling operation, which is located at the intersection of 6 Mile Canyon and 7 Mile Canyon, down to below and to the east of Virginia City. I have some pictures actually of Graham, my stepfather, Graham Hardy, at the remnants of a little tin shed that's there, of what was left of this place once after it was later destroyed. And he's standing at the controls of the cabling operation that would have been used to lower people down into the shafts. And that would have been in the 50s, later 50s, I believe. Here's another view from another direction of the combination shaft. This is a Watkins photograph. This is a larger photograph that is kind of a little bit larger than an 8 by 10. And you can see, I'm really good at doing that. You can see in the background, way back in the background here, you see Virginia City as a whole, and you get over into here, and you're in the area where the Catholic Church is. This is kind of there's nothing there, of course, today, but it's a common photograph that you see, and you see a large factor there, a big wheel that's still there that takes you looking back over there, and it's a common photograph that you'll see of the area. This is one I just recently picked up of, here again, of the Hale, Norcross, and Savage structure here in the back, looking down towards the Dayton Valley. There's actually the valley right there. And this is actually a glass color slide that has been hand colored. And so what is this right here? Yeah, right, V&T Roundhouse. So here's your track, essentially the same location where it is today, coming down, and this is pretty much the same road that goes out there to it right now, but of course the building is different. Is Tom Gray here tonight? Oh, is he? Okay. So, so the building is there now. Of course, it's obviously different. The one that was built by his dad for the railroad. But this track is essentially the very same location. The same road comes around the corner like that, and goes up, and then comes over onto F Street. This was another. Actually, this photograph was given to me by a guy that I paid too much to for some other photograph. I think he felt guilty. So then we get to the Crown Point mine and mill, and Crown Point, of course, is in Gold Hill. So we're going to skip around a lot. We're not really going in any particular order, but the Crown Point mill was in Gold Hill, and that's the one that you really see when you go up to Gold Hill. On your left, you'll see what's left there of the Crown Point. It's a lot of corrugated tin structure on the left-hand side or the west side of the road. And it was built in 1861 at the mouth of the Crown Point Ravine. The Crown Point Ravine is where you would at one point have gone up in that ravine, and that's where Sandy Bowers built his own little home back up in that ravine. And then it was in about the 1970s or 80s where a United mining operation filled that whole ravine in. Actually, it was my parents had owned that ravine at one time and sold it to the mining company, and then they filled it all in with their digging a deeper open pit mine and filled it all in that area. It was an 8-stamp mill that they had there, and that particular mill, that's a large mill. Some of them, there's a couple of them that got as many as 20 stamps, and I'm not sure if you don't know what a stamp is. It's, see, how would you describe it? If you think of the camshaft in a car, and in the picture, you know, as the cam turns, the pistons in the engine go up and down. Well, it's sort of like that same sort of thing, but these what are called stamps are big, thick iron rods, and they're very, very long, and they function off of this cam. And I don't know, Dan probably knows, you know, how much each one of those things would weigh.
So that's 50 to 1,000 pounds.
Yeah, 50 to 1,000 pounds that these stamps would. So they'd have 8 of these on the cam, or they'd have, or they might have 4 of them, for example, on 2 sets of stamps, and they go up and down and stamp up and crush the ore as it comes through there to be able to process it. You know, they're using steam to make these things work. And so this particular Crown Point mill used 3.5 or 3.5 cords of wood a day, and those cords of wood ran from anywhere from about $15 to $25 a cord, depending upon the kind of wood. That's a lot of wood, and that's 3.5 cords is on the lower end of what some of these mines would use on a daily basis to generate steam. So if you calculate that $59.50 a day, or $1,785 a month, if you calculate that out, we've got any economists in the room? If you calculate that out, you're talking about $42,000, $43,000 a month just to buy wood. And then you think, well, no wonder Lake Tahoe is stripped of wood. No wonder there's no more pinyon pines, or there was no pinyon pines around Virginia City at one time. Most of them have come back, but that is a lot of money. You know, I paid about $400 a year for a cord of oak or almond wood to use in my house in the wintertime, and that's cheap compared to what these guys were putting together. So this is the Crown Point mill, and of course it sits directly under what? trestle, right, exactly. That was quite an operation. And so if you look at this picture, one of the things I always tell people is, you know, the primary thing that you see in a photograph, of any historical photograph, that's okay, look at that primary thing, but start looking in the background of the photographs. Look around, what's around there? I mean, look at little things, even, and consider little tiny things such as, like in this particular building, look at even just the two smokestacks there, and you think, those are big and they're tall. They must have, to be that big and that tall, they must have had to be operating or providing exhaust capability for some large and heavy equipment. Look at these pieces of these are rods or who knows what they are exactly. It's not wood. It may be stamped rods. You think maybe, Dan? Could be stamped rods because they're pretty good size. But look, you know, and you look in it and you say, oh, this is wood or possibly corrugated tin like it is today. And think of all of the wood that took to build this thing, and the amount of wood just that's above ground. You know, we always hear about how much wood was used underground. Think about how much wood was used just for that crown point trestle. It's outrageous. It's amazing. Right down over here on the side of the hill below the crown point is the Gold Hill School. There was a big school, much like the Fourth Ward School in Virginia City. Some of the same kind of architecture, but that was the Gold Hill School. The main street of Gold Hill, or Highway 342, is running right down through this area here. So then we look at the Sierra Nevada mine. That's going the opposite direction. That's on the north end of Virginia City. And it's actually technically sits in 7 Mile Canyon, but it's right off of Highway 342 on the east side of Highway 342, about a quarter of a mile north of Virginia City. It was staked in 1859, like many of these large mines and so forth. It was profitable for a long time. It was a very deep mining operation, and they were big stock deals. So I'm gonna talk about some of this stuff on these stock deals here in a little bit. We're gonna discuss how they did these things. They assayed a lot of their ore that they got from $2.90 to $200 in 7 months. So there was no profit. They made almost no profit in their operation. And so many of these mines and mills and milling operations made very little profit. They made money for the owners. They all, you know, got pretty wealthy, but it didn't make much money for the investors at all. This is a view looking essentially from the cemetery in Virginia City, looking north to the Sierra Nevada mine. So if we look up here, we see a road which is essentially today Geiger grade, and it comes right along. You see that cut, and it comes. So right there is the top end of 7 Mile Canyon, and that drops over. Then it starts to go downhill. Well, the summit is just a little bit around the corner there, and then it starts to drop down into Reno. It's interesting to look at things like that, and we talked about, so you look at other parts, you go, wow, this is the main point. But look, over here, there's some kind of a mining operation going on there. There's like a ranch or something of that nature here. Why is this all fenced in here? Does that belong to somebody? Were there cows in there? What were they doing? What is this mark right in here? Is this a trail where the deer or whatever traveled, you know? And everybody knows about what is referred to as the wild horses in Virginia City.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know if, you know, I'm not a horse person. And one reason is because I personally know that those are not wild horses. They are not Mustangs, like people would like you to believe. And so I hope I'm not busting any bubbles or making anybody mad. But those horses were let out in the 30s by the 102 Ranch down along the Truckee River. And so they have not been roaming the Comstock since time immemorial, you know. They certainly leave gifts for me on a daily basis in my driveway. Or they, you know, they mess up your lawn, they mess up your sprinklers, and oh my golly. So this is the Sierra Nevada. This is another view. Now think about the wood we were talking about. This is wood. Look at the stacks of this wood. And look at these, there's two guys standing right here. Look at the relationship of these people standing right here in relationship to the stacks of wood. So we all know, or most of us do anyway, or some of us maybe, how big, if you were stacking up a cord of wood, what kind of space does it take? Essentially what? 4 by 4 by 8 or 3 by 7 or something like in that order, depending upon where you got. There's different descriptions of cord depending upon who you're buying it from. And so think how many cords there might be in all of this wood from here to here, and you figure this. Let's say this guy is 6 feet. So if you kind of laid him down and started going 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, and see how much it is, and 6 that way, and this way, and do the same thing over here, where did all that wood come from? Well, we kind of know where it came from, but just think of the freighting factors that had to take place to get that wood where it is. To just think of the manpower you had to have to actually stack that wood up there. Think of the manpower it takes to take that wood in and put it in the boilers to generate the steam for dealing with the equipment that they had to deal with. Yeah, right. Yeah, and they had these old wooden forklifts. and yeah, yeah, right. Yeah. So you know, you start thinking about the other aspects of this, and you go, yeah, wow, look at that mine. That's really something. Oh, it looks like this is probably the superintendent's house. It's a nice, or maybe an office space or whatever. But look at all the other stuff. And I always tell people, look around, look at what's there. This is a view looking back towards the Sierra Nevada right here, and Virginia City back behind it. This over here in this little corner is the Union Mine. And it was not a Union mine. It was just called the Union Mine. So it was, it's actually behind the cemetery. This hill here is pretty much what today is where the cemetery is, the Silver Terrace Cemetery. And this is all overgrown now, but this road right here is still there. Just recently came down this road, went off on this road is pretty overgrown now, and ended up rescuing some guy that ran his quad over the side of the thing here and rolled it down the side of the mountain and ran it into a tree. So, you know, we have that happen all the time as well up there. The Sacramento and Meredith. If you go from Virginia City to Reno on a fairly regular basis, you drive directly by, right beside, the remains of the Sacramento and Meredith mine. And it was, again, another one staked in 1859, but it was a smaller operation, much smaller than the most of them. But right here, you look and you see, these guys assessed about $200,000 to their stockholders on the annual, not individually, but as a total assessment. No dividends were paid at any time to the stockholders. So you think, well, I'm paying every year for the privilege of holding stock in your company. That to me is not a good investment, but you never know. This is the Sacramento Mill. Now today is Geiger grade, right here, this cut on the side of the mountain. And now later on, in years later, they actually cut out this old section of the mountain here and back up into here. And that's why this trestle tramway is bringing the ore down. And this is called Cedar Hill in Virginia City, around the north end of Virginia City's back over here. And this If you look up on here, you see all these little pock marks for what are referred to as glory holes, and that's where they tried to find something, and it turns out there was nothing there. But you go by this little cutout, or turnout is what it actually is, that is right there. Here again, you look into this picture and you go, wow, look at that, that's interesting. But look at right here. Looks like mom and a little boy, or a little child, standing there. And it's odd. Oddly enough, it's always fascinated me. So many of these pictures you see like this don't have people in them. So it's unusual to find people in a lot of these photographs. And that's because a lot of them were taken very early in the morning. Because the best sunlight for Virginia City was to take photographs was early morning, because that's when you got your best sunlight. Because once you get to about 3 o'clock, depending upon the time of the year, that sun goes over the backside of Mount Davidson. So it gets dark very early in Virginia City, particularly these days. The Ophir Hoisting Works. Now this is one of the major mines that was operating in Virginia City, right in almost downtown. And there's a number of stories that has to do with the Ophir claim. And the Ophir claim was the one that really started everything with a couple of different guys, McLaughlin, O'Reilly, and Penrod. And they were the ones that were credited with that, along with a ne'er-do-well interloper that came along and said, wow, you're on my land, and if you give me 60% of the interest in this, I won't take you to court over it. And his name was Comstock. And that's how it become known, Comstock, because I've even had conversations with their family, the Comstock original family, during some work that they were doing on looking into their background of the family, and they would tell me that they know that this guy was a scam artist to a great degree. And he was not well thought of within the family. And even today, the people today will tell you, we really don't talk too much about Henry Tompkins Page Comstock, because he's not well thought of in our family. This is the Ophir Hoisting Works. And there's another structure that's been built essentially in this location in recent years. It's the Silverland Hotel that is in town. And it essentially takes up pretty much that area. This picture is one of my favorites, actually, because I'm fascinated by the fact that there's this great harp stand sitting there. And I'm thinking, it's a good thing it's gone, I suppose, because I would have taken it as a kid. As a kid, I always thought, you know, if I take this stuff and preserve it, it'll be still here, and actually that's the case. I have a little shed, not little shed, fairly good size, and I have a couple of these harp stands in the shed, in the storage, because I figured somebody has to make sure that some of this stuff gets saved for posterity. A lot of the signage that was on, like the freight depot, and when in the 50s, when it was just there for falling apart, and actually you find this stuff on the ground. I've still got those in the storage. Those original signs from the freight depot that is now currently under construction. The freight depot is. The county purchased it a couple of years ago. The sprinkler system has been completed in the depot. And in the spring, the plan is to put a new roof on it. There's been a big stink up. I also sit as I'm the chair of the Comstock Historic District Commission. There's a governor's commission, and there's a big battle going on. And I think we've got it figured out, but they want to put back on shake shingles, and it's against fire code. You can't do that. But we've allowed some other metal shake shingles that have been invented and out there and in place, and we put them on the Presbyterian Church in Virginia City, and you walk up and look at it and you can't tell the difference between cedar shake shingles and these wood shake shingles, and so I think that's probably what we want to try to put it back, shake shingles, to look like it originally did. but it'll probably be these metal ones. Or we could opt, we're still looking at some other options, because there's some other technology out there now that has to do with a new kind of, for lack of another word, it's kind of like a sheetrock material, but it's not sheetrock, but it's almost impervious to fire. And you could be allowed, now that the new code says you're allowed to utilize that on a roof, and you can actually use shake shingles, cedar shake shingles on the top of that, because it won't penetrate through. It's been used in some facilities in Montana and a couple of other states on historic structures. So we may be able to do that with the V&T depot, freight depot in Virginia City. So moving forward, so I'm kind of back and forth with railroad and how it relates to these mines. And this, of course, is if, and you know, I think probably most people know where the Historic District Office is on the corner of Union and E Street in Virginia City, and where the locomotive is, where the locomotive that used to be there was stolen back by the train depot. We were in love with that other the locomotive that was there. I'll tell you, the community was. Yeah. And so we have contracts out on Dan for that. Yeah, actually we got a very nice locomotive in its place, and which is an appropriate one for the community, and actually was one that was there many years previous to that. So, but so that Historic District Office would be located back down over here on Union Street, and this is going forward to over here to Mill Street. That would be right over here. Then there was a trestle that went over Union Street, and then it dropped down and went behind the cemetery and over to the Union Mine. This was one of the major operations in Virginia City. That was, like I say, O'Reilly, McLaughlin, Penrod, and Osborne. Those guys were the ones that really found the gold in the Virginia City area there, and dug a pit and were working on it when Comstock came along and gave them a story. This is an interior of the Ophir Hoisting Works. It's not a very good picture. The stereo card that I got looked really bad, and I'm going to try to rescan it and see if I can sharpen it up better and make it look a little better, and some of the magic computer programming that is out there that I like to fool with. This is looking south now from the Ophir mine operation into Virginia City. This is probably in the 1920s or so, I best I can determine. And this is that trestle that goes, and it would go right up here, and it goes into the tunnel that goes in front of the Catholic Church, and then would kind of curve around and come out over by the passenger depot where it is currently today. This being the freight depot itself right now. And at this point, the car house, or what, I forget what that's the proper name or not, where the locomotive was, and trains and cars were parked during the night, was right back over in this area here.
It's still there, south. Oh, it is.
Oh, it is still there. That's right. Oh, I'm thinking of another building that was over here. You're right. Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. So this is, yeah, it's over here on the south end, which is the empty land now and getting ready to be paved by the county. And we've got chain link fence all around the depot at this point to keep people out. I'm gonna go in. You know what would be cool to do is we could, because I was talking with the county's facilitator for the contractor and stuff, would be to do a photograph, what do you call them, a little trip, and get everybody in and let them take photographs of the interior. And
Here's that, several years ago.
oh, you did do that? Yeah, because I've taken a whole lot of photographs in there, documented all of the various names and everything in there. So yeah, if anybody else wants to do that sort of thing, I have contacts. And they're cheap. So let me go back there to the CNC mine, the Consolidated California and Virginia and California mine, and the shaft house is over here. Well, there we go again. Is back over here in this location. This is down here now is about L Street, and C Street is the main street. So you're down on the south, on the lower east side of L Street. Look how huge this is. Look at all of these windows and figure how, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 40. So, you get up, this is well over 100 feet long, this structure here. And then you've got this other portion that comes off over here. This is the Nevada Brewery, and it burned in 1982. And that's the only major fire since my lifetime that I ever missed in Virginia City, major fire. Because we were in California, there's a whole bunch of us that were in California at a fire muster program in Willits, actually, California. And we got and I think we set a record, a number of us set a record on getting back to town from Willits, California. But it was shot. It was an electrical problem that started the fire and totally burned it. It's one of my favorite buildings, and I've actually reproduced, and I have it in my warehouse, I reproduced this sign that says Nevada Brewery to its size, as close as I could figure. The building was being lived in by a group of what we called up there, referred to as the yogis, and it was a religious group that had over in this area. They had put some. This, of course, this photograph is late 70s approximately, and this area they had put these little kind of huts and kind of Hogan kind of operations, and you could go there and sit in there and and contemplate your belly button or whatever they did in there, and they were. I had a schoolmate that I went to school with in Carson here that I don't know why I happened to come across her. She was residing in one of those little huts there one time, and but the CNC was one of the major ones, and it burned in around 1938, somewhere right in that parcel area. I've got some pictures of when it was burning, and boy, you talk about a pyre. That thing was something else. So the California Mine, Consolidated Virginia and California Mining Company, was the largest and most modern in the community at its time. And they had explored way down into the 3,000-foot area, much like the combination. And this is where they were extracting a lot of what we think of and know of as the big bonanza locations. It was a major producer, and it made money for their investors as well. This is another view of it from a different location. And just look at all the wood here that's stacked up there. There's another view of it from here again, another location. And I think another view from St. Mary's Hospital, Art Center now, that you can see it over here to the side, kind of behind. And these tailings, overburden stuff, actually covered over Union Street at one point in time, and then they were cut back years later. This is the driveway for the St. Mary's Hospital. There's when it burned. Well, it was 1938. That's when it burned. And this is taken probably from. Let's see. This is down below L Street, and we're probably up here on about D Street. What a major loss that was. So many of them were lost in that era, that 20s, 30s, 40s era. The Con Virginia Pan Mill, which was a milling operation, was at the top of Six Mile Canyon, and it cost in their dollars then $300,000 to build. So what is that if you multiply that by 24? What it would cost today? 60 stamps. This was a big one. This was the California Pan Mill was one of the major ones in Virginia City, and they processed 250 tons of ore every day. And a day is referring to them as 24 hours. So every 24 hours they're processing 250 tons. how did they get that 250 tons of ore to the mill? Primarily, because this is pretty much in town, it was primarily done by freight wagon. There was a tramway that ore was transferred down into 6 Mile Canyon to another mill later in the 20s called the Butters Mill. It was a cyanide mill. And then I found recently some of the cable from that tramway back up in the mountain on the side of a hill. So it was too big, too heavy, and too long for me to recover it. So it's still laying there. This is another view from the other side. Here's some guy standing in the picture there. And you know, and I often wondered about these. This is Watkins' photograph. And Watkins, it was not unusual for Watkins to set his camera or have an assistant to take the picture, and he'd go stand in the photograph. So I wondered if maybe this was actually Carlton Watkins, the actual photographer. Who knows? It might have been the superintendent of this place too, but something I've always wondered about. So the pan mill, like I say, was at the head of the 6 Mile Canyon. 80 stamps, and it was a big operation, and that's a picture of it, with Virginia City behind it there. This is the pan mill, and the remnants of it are still there. So,
Where are the stamps in that building?
where are they?
Where would
Within that building? I'm trying to remember from when I was in there. No, I wasn't in there. I would say they would have been probably, whoops, well, there's another better picture of it actually, but I would say they were probably at the back end of an area here, or maybe over in here, because the processing, and that's why you've got, everything has to go downhill. So it would come in from the top of wherever you were stamped, and then the process always moved in a downhill area. So they were more likely up in this area. Wouldn't you think, Dan?
I would think so.
Yeah, yeah. So because down here you've got a pond, water pond, for the residue that it utilized. You know, and you think that these are huge. These are beautiful, well-constructed buildings, and it's a shame there's not a thing left of any of this, with the exception of like maybe the freight depot. This is inside one of them. So, you know, how many times you've seen you watched a cowboy movie and they rob the train and they throw the gold in a pack that they throw over the back of the horse, and they've got, you know, a whole bunch of deals like this. You know, how much does 1 cubic foot of gold weigh? Any idea? How much does 1 cubic foot of gold, of processed gold, and it's not in its purest, but pretty close, that you would get off of the train or a stagecoach or whatever? 1 cubic foot weighs approximately 1,200 pounds. And you think lead is heavy, gold is heavy. You know, if you've ever had an opportunity to even pick up a small ingot or bar of gold, you'd be amazed at how heavy that bugger is. So, like the one I was reading to is the bullion car for the railroad had steel or iron, I guess it would have been, floors in it, because they could only lay 1 layer of gold in there when they transported it, because it just weighed so much. I think that's correct, isn't it, Stephen? Yeah, that was I always understood it. And this is inside the pan mill, I'm not going to say it as I remember it. Yeah. So I was as of, you know, I don't know if I retired as of last Thursday, not this Thursday, but last Thursday, from my job as a county emergency management director, and I was the oldest serving emergency management director in the state of Nevada. And they always, a lot of these guys always referred to me as Grandpa, and I would even send out my emails back to them, sign them G-Pa. You know, so yeah, so they always give me a hard time. Well, Joe, don't you remember when Virginia City was really moving? Oh yeah, right, I do. So yeah, you can't really see it, but I'm sure that those we're probably back in here someplace or along in here, because then the ore goes into these pans and it gets processed. So what I'm going to do is this one I'm going to move a lot quicker here, because I want to talk to you a bit about another aspect of this. This is down in 6 Mile Canyon. That's the Empire State Mill. This is another one that is the Baltimore Hoisting Works, and this is actually down at the top end of Gold Hill and a little bit over there towards American Flat. This is down inside of one of the mines. And this is in 7 Mile Canyon. This is part of the Ophir operation that was down there. This is, again, the Gould and Curry Works that was at the entrance of 7 Mile Canyon. And I want to show you another view of this same thing. And if you go down there today at the entrance to 6 Mile or 7 Mile and 6 Mile Canyon, this depression, which is a pond, is still there. You can still get that. And I've often thought about going down there and with my metal detector and see if I could find any gold, but I thought I'd probably get in trouble for it. So this is again, this is in 6 Mile Canyon, and is part of the Gould and Curry mining operation. So you see, let's see. You see this particular view here in 6 Mile Canyon, and this is Sugarloaf Hill there. And you look right here and you see this little white house, and you see this ore cart here, and that's a weigh station where they're weighing it. If we go to the next picture, there's a different view of it where the thing is right on the weight factor, and they're weighing the amount of ore that's in the freight wagon. And that's a very interesting shot, because it really shows you how they determined how much weight and how much volume there was that they were being processing. So I'm going to move quickly, and there's some other ones, but I want to get to a specific spot. This is the Justice that was in Gold Hill, down lower Gold Hill, just before you get to where now is the Donovan Pit, which is referred to as where the big open pit as you come through Devil's Gate. Devil's Gate would be right back over here. That was at that location. A lot of the timbers and rock that were foundational material for this structure have actually been located, and they're marked, and they're currently up there by the old. They're being stored by the Comstock Mining Company to go into what do you call it? Display of one kind or another. That would show you the layout of the foundation of that structure. This again is 6 Mile, another one. But here again, you look at all these. Look at all this wood, all that wood there, and all this wood that for this little operation there, the Winfield Mill in 7 Mile Canyon. The Savage in the middle of town. Here's one of the things I wanted to mention. That this is the Savage mining operation, and we're looking down 6 Mile Canyon. There's Sugarloaf, and this would have been D Street right here, because this is the Savage Mansion, the offices and so forth of the Savage mine, and this is down here is about E or F Street. So in 3 years ago now almost, Story County or Virginia City had to completely put in a whole new sewer system throughout the entire community. And in that process, they uncovered some unusual things within these mines that were underground, where they were putting these things in, these sewage lines. And so you see this building right here. This is the Savage Mansion, which referred to as the mansion, and it was the mining office operation. So if you flick back, that's this corner, the corner of that building right there. So, so you look at this, and this is 2 separate pictures, and it's pictures that I took because they uncovered a hole, when they were digging this thing, and it just kind of fell through, and there's a couple of idiots in town that feel like it's okay to get down in these things, One of them is me, and the other one is a friend of mine by the name of Mike Nevin. And so they called me and said, hey, we uncovered some tunnels under here, in front of the Savage. And so you had to, this looks like it's taller than it is, but it's actually only about 4 feet because it's about half filled with rubble. And I think at one time it actually had walkability within it. And so I dropped down from up in this area, and you drop down, and it's very narrow, and to get down here I had to crawl on hands and knees. But what I finally decided that this must be, because of some entrance things in the sides of these walls here. See if we can see where some of it is. When I had to crawl in here and go in here, and I went around this corner, and it kind of dead-ended. And in order to get out of there, there's no way you can stand up. This thing's probably 2 feet wide, maybe 3 at the most. And I actually had to back up and back out of this until I could get to a point where I could actually move about to turn around and go. What I determined that is, you know, that in order to pump the water out, they had to have these big Cornish pumps the flywheel would be like 40 foot in diameter. Well, of course, any kind of a flywheel has got an axle associated with it, right? And in order, you've got something that's 40 feet tall, that if it's off by just a little tiny bit, that flywheel is going to wobble, and it's going to make a giant mess, and it's going to kill itself. More than likely if you let it wobble like that, and I'm sure many of you are fully aware of what can happen with that. So in these walls, I found that, in fact, you can just barely see one of these openings right here. And it was really difficult to try to take, I'm climbing on all fours, and I'm trying to carry a really expensive camera with me, but here's one of these entrances, and as you look in that entrance, there were these large, you can see these large nut, a bolt and a nut, and what I think it was is that it was you got down inside there, and you could adjust that nut and make that axle go up or down on one side or another to level this axle for these huge 40-foot flywheels on these Cornish pumps. It's the only thing we can figure out what it must have been for, and it's quite interesting. And so I found it determined I was going to document that, and so we were able to do that. So as you talk about all of these mines and these mills and so forth, you're talking about big business, big transactions, big business transactions. You're talking about a lot of money. You're talking about mining technology. You're talking about a lot of things, and I had the county clerk called me one day and said that they had found some books in the clerk's office that said it looked like there was some kind of a code book or something, and could you come look at it and see what you think? So I went up there, but you think, well, these mines and these mine owners, they're all over the country. They're in San Francisco, they're in Denver, they're in New York, they're in wherever, and their superintendents are on site at their mine in Virginia City. They didn't have telephones, of course, at that point in time. There was no internet that I'm aware of. There was mail was okay, but it took a long time. It was maybe slower than it is today. And how did they conduct business? How did they talk back and forth? If you sent a telegram, for example, anybody could tap onto that line and hack your telegraph thing and what messages you were being sent. And it was a big deal when these guys, the telegrapher in a telegraph office, a telegrapher, of course, knows everything about your business because he's writing it down and he's sending it to somebody. And he knows everything he needs to know. And these guys were in many instances, were almost like spies. They would sell that information to other mining operations. So they had to come up with some plans of how we can secretly exchange information. And if you want me to dig further down this particular shaft, I need to know, so I'm sending you a telegram and asking you, shall I dig more here? If I want you to sell 5,000 shares of this particular stock, or you want us to buy this, or I need you to tell me this. So how do we do this in secret? Well, they began working on coming up with some methods for actually protecting their communications. They would use secret messages and messengers. They would produce coded messages. And Stephen and I have talked about this in recent times and collaborated on some information with this. And I've become fascinated with this process of these codes and that they were using. They used ciphers and codes, and they had coded telegraphic messages. They had secret meeting rooms that they would meet in, and some of them were underground rooms that were near their mining operations. So this is a coded thing. This is the one Stephen sent me. This one that he found that he personally coded this, I think. But, this is a message that went by Western Union Telegraph Company, and this is August of 1874, and it's being sent to Henry Yarrington. And it says, it makes no sense when you read it. And it says, bank cipher delighted heave Father Pettifog, heave poem and as haunt told have whenever obtrusion, I think courts or pirates or something it looks like, requiring from action paper hawk and haunt prone prey ostrich Jackson and Thomas doing splendidly. You go, okay, that's what I thought you were going to tell me. So it looks like apparently what we were thinking was that a clerk or somebody that had the other book, because I'd have a book with codes and you'd have the other book of codes, and so when I sent you a telegram, you could look up all of these words and you could put the message together of what it was I was trying to tell you. So in this case, it looks like somebody had the other code book, the other end of it, and so here's their handwriting. It says, so they inserted that we have made the purchase as I can't quite tell, as I told you. I think, does it say it here? No, it doesn't. As I told you, anything occurs. Do it, and I will stand by. I'll stand by your decision, basically. And then he mentions at the end, apparently something happened to Jackson and Thomas. They probably were injured, and he's saying that they're doing splendidly, because that's not important information. So it's like any other codes and so forth. And they started out using codes from the railroad code books that were used in England. And I've got several of these code books now, and that I've since gone after looking for. And the railroad code books were not anything different than they used here for the most part. It's saying just a shortened way to send a message to the next station to say, you know, we're making a drop or doing whatever. And so it wasn't at all unusual. But these codes so the bank cipher delighted that you have made the purchase, and as I told you, whenever anything occurs requiring prompt action, do it and I will stand by you. That's what the message said. So here's the first ones that they started looking at using. The General Telegraphic Mining Code was developed early on, and they use these on a regular basis. This is 3 of the books that the clerk, the county clerk, let me take and use. And these are about 4 by 6 or 4 by 8 type books. They're small pocket type books. And in the books are these codes. So they would be pre-printed with all of the various words that were very common, you know, narcotic, NASA, and you could fill in whatever word that you wanted it to relate to. So if you wanted to use the word, exchequer, being one of the mines, there you would inject the word nail. If you wanted it to relate to the Kentuck, you'd interject the word Nelly. And so that's where all of these, you know, they have all of the names of the mines and mills that they were talking, because they were used not just by the mining operations, but by the bankers, the stockbrokers. Stockbrokers in Virginia City were a big deal. One of them alone was known to have earned as much as $15,000 a year. Very often the stockbrokers themselves in Virginia City made more money than the mine owners. And even another one, oddly enough, that made a lot more money than the mines made and the mills operated were the toll road operators. Because every road going in and out of Virginia City was a toll road. And I've suggested that again lately, but nobody kind of moved on it. So here, this is where they were using numbers, and they had codes for that. So the word abolish would relate to the number 30. So I wanted you to sell 30 shares or 30,000 shares or whatever, I'd say abolish, or abstain for 40, or whatever the thing is. And so they were very careful about the communications that they used to do their business with. So if they wanted to say, did you get our dispatch of, they would use the word gammon right there. Did you get the dispatch of whatever date maybe? Fascinating subject. So I wanted to share that information with you. We could keep going. I'm sure we're at our time at this point, and that's one of the problems. Is like I said early on, this is actually at least a two-part operation, and I wanted to show you some of the major mines and mills and what they were involved in on the Comstock and how they interacted with the railroad and with there's a whole other program with the railroad, the Sutro Tunnel. Why the railroad got started up because of involvement with Sutro Tunnel operation and the dislike for Sutro, and the Sharon and Ralston decided, well, we could build us a railroad and not have to pay anybody to move our ore, because Sutro wanted $2 per ton of ore that he took out through the mine or through the tunnel. And then my trivia question to a group that I spoke to the other day was, is the Sutro Tunnel really a tunnel? Or is it an adit? And we go, I never really thought about it. So what's the definition of a tunnel? And has what on either end? Yeah, an opening basically, or a portal. And what does an adit have? One portal, one opening, and a dead end on the other end. So technically speaking, I guess you could say, yeah, it's a tunnel because it opens into the 1,700-foot level of the Savage Mine. And so I guess you could say it's a tunnel, but it doesn't ever open up to sunlight again, because it opens to the Savage, and then it goes on laterals either way, in either direction, to drain the water out of these various mines along this one lateral area. So I don't know. It was just an interesting question that we posed for funsies: is it an adit or is it truly a tunnel? A definition based upon who you want to think about it is up to you, I guess. At any rate, I would open for any few questions that you have. I wish I could go through this, but what I tell a lot of people that ask me questions about history on the Comstock is, how much time do you have?
How big the vein of silver?
Jack wants to know how big the vein of silver was. In which location? Yeah, silver, the ore that was on the Comstock, and depending upon where you were in the vein, basically, was roughly about 600 feet wide, about 3.5 miles long, and then in what they call a ledge when you're mining. It depends on that and how rich that particular ledge is. But it was like a major vein, like, sometimes it was, 15, 20, 30 feet tall, that you're getting good, solid, rich ore. And it took very little processing to deal with that. You just had to get the rock away from it. And if you've ever watched any of these things, and the one I'm fascinated with recently is the Australian gold miners that has now come on TV. And these guys are digging off of the surface of the ground out in the middle of Timbuktu, if Timbuktu's in Australia. But and they're doing with a metal detector, and they're moving a little bit of dirt, and they're picking up huge nuggets. Nuggets that are like $3,000 and $4,000 worth of nugget. It's just right almost off of the ground in various parts of Australia. It's mind-boggling. So that it was almost that kind of pureness that was coming out of the Comstock. And then at one point it gets to the point where you don't have that ease and that purity of gold that's coming out, and it requires other kinds of processings that has to be done. For instance, using cyanide to process it, which was the Butters Mill down at 6 Mile, was the largest cyanide operation in the United States at the time. Ore from Tonopah area later on, after about 1905 or so, was being brought up by the Carson, Colorado, to Mound House, essentially transferred to the V&T Railroad, brought up, and then it was on a tram, went down 6 Mile Canyon and processed at the Butters Mill. All the way from Tonopah, in that general area down there. And you say, well, what happened to all of these old buildings and these metal workings that were in it and so forth? A lot of that stuff was taken and down in the and to the Tonopah area, to the Mojave area, Regensburg, Johannesburg, in the Mojave Desert, in that area was transferred and moved down there. And so you go down there to Tonopah, you go down to the Tonopah Mining Museum, which is really nice, really neat. What you're seeing actually is stuff that may well have come from the Comstock, from Virginia City. So with that, any other questions?
In 1938, when the Consolidated burnt, were they producing any gold or processing any rock?
When in 1938, when the Consolidated
Burnt,
had
a fire.
Minimal, yeah, not much at all, really. Yes, sir.
Do you know the origin of the name Sugarloaf Mountain? Was it named by a Brazilian? There's a Sugarloaf in the Rio de Janeiro.
That's correct. To my knowledge, and what I've always believed was the actual reason that it was called Sugarloaf, is because in the 1800s, that's how you bought sugar. Sugar was, you purchased it, and they would, if you put a little bit of moisture with sugar, you can form it into almost anything you want. And so you would buy it in that shape, that conical shape. And what that is a volcanic cone, or a volcanic plug, is what that actually is. But that's how, as far as I know, how it got its name, because of the same shape. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Where did all this water go? This 9 Olympic swimming pools of water every day, where did it go?
Through the meter at my house. Yeah, right. It actually went down 6 Mile Canyon in what that's called Virginia Creek, or we used to because it also has effluent from the sewer plant, so So we used to always call it the same name as the guy who was the head of the sewer plant in Virginia City. We called it his creek. His name was Bacchus, so we called it Bacchus Creek. But it would go down 6 Mile Canyon, and it comes out at what is now the area called Mark Twain, and it would flow out, and it would just sink. The theory was it was going to flow all the way to the Carson River. But in reality, even today, when we have major rainstorms and so forth, it goes out into the flat area and just sinks into the ground. It never makes it above ground to the Carson River. And that was the same thing with Sutro Tunnel. That when he brought that water down, initially it went into a pond, and from there it flowed out of that pond. And it just went out into the desert and kind of disappeared into the ground. So if he had this pond there, here's another trivia question, and Pam, you can answer this. Is why would Sutro have wanted to have a big pond of water at the end of the Sutro Tunnel?
To have Sutro baths.
Yeah. There's a bathtub out there around Sutro too, and I always refer to it as the Sutro bath. It was for frogs. He liked frog legs. He was a fanatic about eating frogs' legs, so he raised frogs, and there's still frogs out there today. Pam eats a lot of them from there. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.